Hello everyone and welcome to This Nintendo Life episode 192. My name is NBZ and I'm feeling a little deja vu here, Bally, because we've kind of done this before, and us in our infinite wisdom, you know, we were making preparations. We were like, let's record before this weekend so that we can just spend this entire weekend playing It Takes Two together, having a ball of a time, just not worrying about it. And then my PC decided to die on me after we recorded segments 1 and 2. So I can't currently retrieve those files. They are living on a hard drive that is inaccessible at the moment. Hopefully I will get them, and at some point we'll upload those 1 and 2 segments that we previously did for this episode as a Patreon bonus. But looks like the one time we had some foresight, Bally, it just backfired on us.
I mean, I say a couple of negative things about Bloodstained, and MBZ can't handle it. It just decides to delete the entire...
Exactly,
you know,
yeah. I just could not take your hot takes. They were too hot for me.
Can't handle them hot takes.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, we're back here, and we're going to be redoing the segments. But for you, it's your first time hearing it, so we're going to make it as magical and as seamless as possible for everybody listening out there. So yeah, Bally, how are you doing? How's life?
I'm very good. I'm looking forward to playing some more It Takes Two. Looking forward. Yeah, it's a bit crazy so far.
Yeah, quite bonkers. Lots of things going down, lots of crazy things happening, and exciting times. As we'll probably discuss that next time on the show. However, this time we have other things to talk about, very important things. Video games, the most serious of topics. Bally, do you want to tell the folks what the show today will be about?
For the first segment, we're going to talk about the games that we have been playing. For the second segment, you have sent us in some emails we're going to talk through. And then for the third segment, it's the return of the Jukebox. If you don't know what the Jukebox is, that is where myself or MBZ tests the other person and says, hey, here's a video game song. You have to guess what video game this song is from. And we do 5 songs. And this time, MBZ is going to be testing me.
Yeah, it's time for some revenge, motherfucker. Because, you know, I was too nice to you last time.
You're normally too nice. And then I'm normally a little bit harsh. So I'm due.
Okay, you are due some devastation. So we'll get to that, of course, but at the top of the show here, I want to remind everybody we are doing our Backlog Club, our next one on Paper Mario for the Nintendo 64. You can play it, of course, on the original Nintendo 64 if you want to. You can play it on your Wii U through the Virtual Console service there. Various ways that you can get a hold of this game and play it as we also play it. We are going to be doing that show in a month's time, so in 2 shows' time, which I believe will take us to the end of April. 26th of April, I believe, will be when that goes up. Yeah, get in your comments, your questions, all that stuff. We have our Discord thread there that you can go check out and post some thoughts about Paper Mario. You can also email us your thoughts about Paper Mario to our email address, which Bally will tell you right now.
Please email ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com.
Fantastic, and we look forward to chatting about that. I'm at the end of the first kind of section of that game, the first chapter. I'm going into the second chapter, and great stuff so far. I'm really enjoying it, and we'll discuss that in depth. Bally, it's time for a reckoning. It's time for you to talk to me about one of my favourite games. It was my game of the year for 2019, Bloodstained, Ritual of the Night, a game I have a lot of history with. Kickstarted it back in the day. I believe I was backer number 50 or something. That's how early in.
Number 50? And you don't even have a painting of yourself in that game.
Yeah, it was really, like, I think I talk about this in the past. When last time we talked about this on a show, I was going through, like, I was in deep with the weeds with, like, the pre-release of this, going on forums, finding, like, weird stuff going on about, you know, them posting hints and teases and lots of stuff going down, and was following it very closely. So yes, and then it came out, and I was a little bit worried because I was like, oh, is it going to be a Mighty Number 9 situation? And it turned out, no, it's not. It's actually a fucking fantastic video game, and that is a fact, and there are no other opinions about it. It's just good. Bally, tell me why you don't like Bloodstained Ritual.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the Metroidvania bar is crazy high these days, and it just keeps getting higher with games like Ori Will of the Wisps coming out last year. You know, it's a genre we both love dearly, and we've both played a lot of Metroidvanias. You've played slightly more than me, and yeah, this game just does a lot of things that I'm really not into. Some of those things I think are generally quite bad, and others I think are just choices that they've gone for to keep it in line with traditional Castlevania games. So,
Yeah.
for example, when you get a new ability like a double jump after you defeat like a mini boss or a boss or something, I like it when the game forces you to use that ability to get out of the situation you're in. And I feel like this game does it maybe once or twice, but it doesn't do it consistently. And often you gain abilities through other means, like the shard system, or there's just crazy levels of like menus when it comes to the number of different shards and food and other collectibles. And the fact that there is a point in this game where you need to go and fight an enemy in order to get a shard and use that shard's ability to essentially swim is a really poor choice generally. And I should say that shards are basically enemies randomly drop shards, and then essentially the enemy gives you the ability to use an attack that enemy had, and it uses up your magic meter. It's your range attack.
Yeah, it's like a magic spell, basically, that you cast. And this has been in previous Castlevania games, most notably stuff like Aria of Sorrow, where you would get stuff that I believe changed your weapons, and you'd get stuff like that from the enemies. And it's been in a bunch of these different types of games. So, again, like Bloodstained does feel like this amalgamation of all the best ideas from all the Castlevania games, but there are some in there that I'm not a huge fan of. And I think there's ways in which Castlevania does these ideas well, and ways in which they don't. And I agree with you, like the whole figuring out that you need to kill this one specific enemy to get that ability that lets you shoot underwater is really tough, because you have so many fucking shards in your inventory that most people are not going to go through and check every single one when you get them. And so you will probably be sifting through a sea of these things, not knowing that a crucial ability is actually hidden within this sea of stuff that is really just used as, you know, bonuses or just like extra things that are different ways of doing damage.
Some delineation in the menu that essentially called it a bit like an HM in Pokemon or something might have been useful, because there was another ability.
Yeah, or even just tying it to a boss and having it, as you said, like after fighting a certain boss, then you have a water segment and you can only get through it with the power you've acquired from them. But it tends to be the case with these Castlevania games that you don't actually get that many like attack or movement abilities. A lot of it is like you can go upside down, or you can turn into a bat or into fog or stuff like that in Symphony of the Night. And in this game, I can't remember that many aside from the double jump, because I think some of it is like, oh, now you can open these glowing blue doors because you have, you know, an ability to do so. Or there's like a beam that like ricochets off different surfaces, and so you can kind of go through, and it's a lot of teleportation. There's a very late game one which literally lets you warp from one space to another. So a lot of it is more about unlocking the next area, almost keys, as opposed to actual abilities that are used in different, you know, variety of ways.
They are keys, but they're still abilities to the point where you could make it compulsory to use that ability to get out of the area you gain the ability, sort of thing. And like one of them's like a giant hand thing that you can control, and I had to like look up a guide online, like how do you actually even use this ability, and where can I even find this ability, because it's in its own separate shard menu that is separate to the one that is the swimming in water ability. And it's just that felt very clunky to me. And just when so many Metroidvanias are so slick in the way that they design a dead end that you then defeat something, get the ability and get out, it just felt very like clunky. And there's other things like this game, and this is something that I think Samus Returns does, but I don't like a ton, is that save rooms are separate to teleportation rooms, and there's just distances between these rooms that is another big gripe for me, is just the pace at which Miriam moves. And that's to say, even as you said, like a lot of these abilities, they're more so like keys than they are actual abilities that increase your speed of movement, a bit like an Ori or an Hollow Knight or something. And that means that I found backtracking took much longer. And there's only one area in the game where you can essentially buy potions, craft stuff, upgrade your items, and you're going back there a lot. And there's a little bit of map to get back to that room, and I would have just preferred.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Is like the warp room is like on this top area that you have to drop down, go down to the lady who's like, kill these murderers dead. Like that's one of my actual favorite things about this game, is that stupid woman who gives you the side quest, which all the side quests are basically like kill this X number of enemies, and every time you take one from her, she's like, kill these murderers dead. And so if you go back there and she has like 15 quests, you're just like A button mashing through them, and you just hear that same line of dialogue like 10 times in a row. I found that very funny. And like the voice acting in this game, I don't think is fantastic, but I actually thought it was like one of the aspects that I didn't expect to be like decent, and I think it is decent.
Yeah,
you know?
No, it's okay, and that whole movement thing, backtracking, the corridors, a lot of the corridors feel very narrow, and it is a case of you must defeat this enemy, otherwise you cannot pass, sort of thing. And
Gandalf standing there with his staff.
Gandalf, and I way prefer it where, you know, I'm jumping and dodging and diving, and I can just get past an enemy later in the game because I've got some new ability, like what's the famous spin from Screw Attack.
The Screw
of course.
Attack, yeah.
How can I forget Screw Attack?
Yeah.
But yeah, so like stuff. It doesn't feel like you ever get a Screw Attack equivalent in the same way, and that sort of thing, and it just feels slow and methodical. And I know that that's a big point of what this is going for, but it's really just not my cup of tea at all. And
it's really interesting, right? Because I am the one who harps on like controls and movement the most on this show, and like I am very finicky about it. And I totally understand what you're saying, because Miriam doesn't move that fast. Like, she is kind of methodical and plodding, but there is like the way in which her like kind of scarf like billows behind her, and like the movement is mirroring a lot of what Castlevania has done in the past. But actually, like, I think part of it is it's a lot better than those old NES games in terms of its like air control and that type of thing, which like air control didn't exist back then.
It's quicker than Castlevania 4, which is the only other one I've played. I'll give you that.
Yes, that is literally just like step by step plodded. Like, there you can look at an animation cycle and be like instantly recognizable as Castlevania, right? And that's what those old games are. Whereas this one is a little bit faster in that sense. But I think the thing with this game is it's not about its movement. It's not about feeling like you can just get through areas and do that stuff, because the purpose of it is less so built around, I guess a lot of it for me is built around exploration, but it's in a different way, right? Like it's about, because there are RPG mechanics here, which you haven't really touched on, right? Like the idea that you get these armors that you equip or weapons that you equip, and you also have numbers that go up as you kill more enemies. There's a level up animation that I love. Every time that pops up in a Castlevania game, when you level up, the screen pauses and it does the whole like swish level up thing. That's awesome. Also, the animation of the shard going into Miriam, I always tried to be in the air when that happened, because it's really cool if she's hanging in the air and the shard just like stabs her in the chest. You get this like stained glass window around the side. I know you're not a big fan of the visuals in this game as well, but I think that stuff looks really nice, and yeah, so for me it really is about survival. So getting from save point to save point, and as you go, you're killing enemies, you're always leveling up, you're always gaining experience, even when you're getting lost. And I think part of the thing that is not connecting with you here is like you get more frustrated if you can't find where you need to go or what you need to do, whereas I wasn't as bothered by that, just because I know that even if I am going in the wrong direction, it's not wasted time like it would be in something like Super Metroid, because you're not really, unless you find like accidentally an energy tank in Super Metroid, that time you're not gaining anything really. You're just exploring for the sake of it. I think Axiom Verge is quite bad about this actually, and part way through it, where it's really, I had no idea where to go, and I was like, okay, what? And I'm just backtracking, and I'm not really achieving much.
Yeah, that game is very Super Metroid in that sense, definitely.
Totally, yeah. But with Bloodstained, I forgive it, because even when I am getting lost, like there's this section where you're supposed to go under this well, and it's not clear that you actually can hold down and go under it. Like, you know, when you hold down and press A to drop through a platform, it's just not made clear at all that it's possible to do that. And so I was wandering around for ages before I went back there and finally realized, I just hold down and press A to just...
I had a similar issue with a cog and a spike that you're meant to duck, and...
Dude, I literally did that on live stream. Like, I was talking to the stream about, like, I don't know where I go, and then I tried to get through this cog before, and like when I did it in the past,
yeah, I thought, I'm just getting hit back. It can't be here. I need to go.
I'm just getting hit back. There's no way through.
Yeah.
But you need to like be exactly in the center of it and ducking so that you can get through. And I totally agree with you. Shit like that is like it's not clear. Like, it's not made clear enough.
That's just not Metroidvania. That's just not cricket, right? It's just not.
No, I think it is. But I think it's classic. I think it's much more old school design.
Okay.
It definitely
enough,
is
yeah.
Metroidvania, but it's like it's leaning on the type of design that was, and I think that's maybe one of the problems with Bloodstained is it is a little too leaning on the Castlevania tropes of old.
I'm not sure that this is the right game to appeal to a new generation of Castlevania fans necessarily. I don't know. I'm not convinced.
Yeah, potentially not. There are a lot of smart changes though, right? Like, I do think that the way in which it is, I don't know, it has a lot of variety to it, and a lot of the difficulty I think is pitched okay. Like, I don't think it's super challenging as long as you're leveling up and that type of thing. So yeah.
So like what you're saying about the RPG mechanics and exploring, I was enjoying that a lot more sort of middle of the game, and I was like, right, I'll see where this path goes. Okay, I got these items, defeated these enemies, I'm leveling up. The next boss I faced was considerably easier as a result, but at a certain point I just kind of got to this point where I was like, oh, I can't be bothered to like do more exploration and backtracking and this sort of thing, and that all just compounded in some really unfun boss fights. And I think for me the bosses are one of the weaker aspects of the game in some parts, especially the bosses that are very similar to Miriam herself. One of them is even a doppelganger of Miriam, but on top of that I think there's a lot of humanoid bosses where their movement just feels, all my issues with the movement feel compounded in these boss fights, where there's a lot more emphasis on moving and jumping and getting on the right side of them and doing these attacks, and a lot of the phases just feel quite rote, and I don't feel like the humanoid bosses in particular are doing enough interesting things that I'm often used to with Metroidvania boss fights, and I preferred the larger, more extreme bosses in this game, of which I don't think there's enough, honestly. And I just found that my issues were compounded where I'd be like, and this is my whole issue with like action game versus RPG is that like I'll be like, right, I'm stuck on this boss, let's check out this guide online. And then the guide's like, right, well, you need to equip this weapon, this cloak, this scarf, make sure you've got this shard and the painting spinning around you, and you need to be level 33 or whatever, and then you should be fine. And I'm like, I have like one of those things. I like the idea of, if you get stuck in a boss like Ori or Hollow Knight or whatever, you look at it and you're like, oh, you can jump like this in order to get damage in there, and you're looking up the strategic nature of how to face it from an action perspective. It's less
you say this, but like when last year I did my replay of Ori on hard mode and fought that spider for like an hour and a half and couldn't get through it, and then later came back and destroyed that spider, that exists in that game as well. It might not be as obvious and it might not be as on the surface,
but it's normally like one item, whereas I felt that every time I was like, right, I'm stuck, I need to check out, they'd be like, right, you need this and this, and I'd be like, oh my god, plus leveling up, like, I think that's the crux, is the leveling up nature. And I was actually only 4 levels lower than you by the end boss fight, and I really struggled, and there's 2 phases of the final boss with no save point in between, so I wasn't able to defeat the final boss. I got to the final boss once, but it took me so long to get there. I was like, there's no way I'm beating this game. Like, it's just not working for me. And yeah,
I think it's just like compounding issues, right? Like, it's, if you are not into the base movement mechanics or the the RPG stuff or all of it, like, there will get to a point where it's just not necessarily worth you going through that just to see the credits or whatever. And I totally appreciate that.
It sounds crazy harsh, but it was just the music that I liked a lot, and I can't argue that there was anything else that I liked a lot.
Yeah,
there's lots that I liked, but I don't think there was much, if anything, that I liked a lot, and apart from the music, which is stellar. Yeah,
what do you think about the theming of the Castlevania games? The kind of gothic horror stuff, and the castle and the weird. There's always a clock tower. There's always like these kind of different weird places you go to. There's the gardens in this one. How did you feel about it, like, thematically? Because that's another one of the elements of these types of games that really clicks with us usually.
Yeah, it's decent, and I actually really like the Castlevania TV show, and I love this relationship between like demons and the church and all the whatever, and and Dracula, obviously, but I like that theming to a degree. I think this one arguably doesn't stay true to that theming, where there are just so many enemies that are like jokes and silly
Shovel
things.
Knight's an enemy in this game, man.
Yeah, and it sounds strange, but I like that theming when it takes itself a bit more seriously.
Interesting.
Arguably, you know, I like you know, these are serious topics of like science versus religion and Dracula and mass murder, and like sure, you can joke about those things and have fun with it in a more sort of Halloweeny sort of way, but I think the show takes itself very seriously.
Yeah, I think that's the disconnect
speaking.
here, is because Castlevania has never been that serious as a video game franchise. It's always been quite hammy and like leaning into the stupidity, right? Like a lot of the reason I think this game got some buzz around the time is because it's stupid. Like there's some really stupid abilities you can get.
It's like dogs' heads and like cute dogs' heads.
And the squeaky shoes and stuff like that as weapons and toy boots or whatever. And yeah, that's kind of like the way of it, and I appreciate it for that. And I'm never going into a Castlevania game being like, give me some lore, give me some story. That is absolutely bottom of my list.
And I don't necessarily want lore and story. I think I just want a more serious tone, arguably. And if that builds to more lore and story, then that would probably be good in my book.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't overtly dislike the theming. I just don't like the way this game decides to handle it. And yeah, there's something about the art style that really grinds with me. And yeah, I sound like a real negative Nelly today. But
you do, yeah.
We were saying that this is probably the largest gulf in our opinions on a game, arguably ever. So
maybe, yeah.
So yeah,
it's weird. Like the Castlevania series is one of those that I got too late, right? Like I didn't grow up with Castlevania, and I was always curious about it, but I was never, you know, we don't like horror, we're not into that stuff. Like Bloodborne, everyone's like, Bloodborne is like the 3D Castlevania, but I look at Bloodborne and I'm like, that scares me, I don't want to play that. And the thing with Castlevania is like, because it started on the NES, it's not really that horror-y or scary. I'm sure when children back in the late 80s who are playing it were probably like, oh man, this Dracula fight is so scary, right? Because the music and everything, and you've never seen something like that before.
That was photorealism for the time.
Exactly, which is a bit wild to think about. But because they're 2D side scrollers and I'm, you know, into that type of stuff, I was like, yeah, let's play Symphony of the Night. And I played Symphony of the Night and I was like, wow, this is so impressive for the time it was made and the ideas it has. And, you know, there are issues with that game, but I think overall it nails that kind of intersection between the Metroid, you know, power curve of like finding stuff and, you know, getting more powerful, but also does something new with the RPG elements, with the teleportation, like the map design, the castle. I can just like see it in my brain, like those squares are like seared into my mind of Symphony of the Night. And I think Bloodstained at the time, I was like, yeah, I can see it, like when I think about it, and to some degree I still can in a way, but that's kind of the thing that really gets me, is like how interconnected these spaces are. And how well designed I think they are from that perspective. And they're not platforming focused, they are, as we said, more focused on just like killing enemies and getting through to the next place. But I really like the secret places that you can find, like hitting walls to find chickens in them, that type of thing that's classic in a Castlevania game. And, you know, usually it's really weird, right? Like, I don't really like secret levels in games, I don't really like bad movement in games, all these things. Castlevania has all these things and I fucking love it, right? And it is such an antithetical thing, but it's a contradiction that I'm willing to live with, and that's kind of like how it's come about. So you know, I played the original Castlevania on NES and I loved it, even though it's fucking stupidly hard and very unfair. And I don't say that when it comes to other games like, I don't know, Mario 3. Like, I'm not a big fan of Mario 3, the way it's slippy and weird, and I don't think it controls that well. And a lot of people will be like, but you like Castlevania. But I'm like, yeah, but Castlevania, it should feel like that. It should be weighty and weird and like have this whip that's kind of slow and methodical, and you should get hit back into a pit. And that, I understand, makes no fucking sense, but it just does. It just does to me. And that's kind of the thing, is like, I just love everything about Castlevania games and the way they move. So yeah, I can't say much else than that, really, to justify it. Yeah,
I mean, and you had played enough Castlevanias by the time this came along, where you did have that like nostalgia for more Castlevania in a world where there's no Castlevania games coming out anymore. You know, like it. So I appreciate that this game is doing a lot of things that appeal to those fans.
Totally. But there we go. Bally, I think we're just going to cross you off the list of Castlevania now. You've now played 2, one in each style, and I would argue...
I'm glad to have played them and to have had these discussions.
Yes,
sure.
I would argue you've played maybe the best ones in each category. So, like, if you're bouncing off both of those, it's probably not a good indication for the future with Castlevania for you. So.
Oh well.
We all have our series that, you know. Now you've got another answer for like something everyone loves but you hate, and there you go. That's what you need.
That's where I will push back. Is I don't think there was like glowing love for this when it came out.
I don't know, man. Giant Bomb had it in their top
industry.
10 games of the year. Jim Sterling put it on their list.
Okay, yeah.
You know,
it's like sitting at like 82. Like it's not.
I wouldn't go by Metacritic scores for this type of thing, because I think like Metacritic is interesting and useful, but it's always I don't
think meta scores work as well when they're appealing to a more niche fan.
Yeah, and they're
group.
also like a capsule of a time, right? I think discussions past when the game came out were different versus like when it launched and those types of things. So
yeah.
Anyway, good. I'm glad you've played it at the very least. I, on my Nintendo Switch, have been playing another little game, an indie that came out, I think, end of last year, or maybe it was middle of last year, called Wide Ocean Big Jacket, a name that Bally cannot remember and refused to remember. And I heard Guillaume talk about this on RFN, a couple of other people. It got a bit of buzz last year. And it is a narrative game about these 4 people who go on a camping trip. And these 4 people there's Brad and Chloanne, who are the older couple. They're like their mid-20s, they're married, they're adults. And then Brad's niece, Maud, and her boyfriend, quote unquote, they're like 12 or 13 years old. So like whatever that means when you're 12 and 13 years old, are coming along with them. And so it's this interesting kind of, I wouldn't say family drama, because it's like a loose relationship between the uncle and the niece, but it's basically an hour long, just over an hour, and it is just scenes from this camping trip. There's not really much plot to speak of. It is very character driven, but I really, really enjoyed it, and a lot of that has to do with the writing. Presentationally, it's interesting because these characters are all polygonal characters, and they are like realized in a space, and you can walk around in that space, like in the campsite. There's a sequence early on where you're playing as Brad and you are unpacking the car, taking boxes out, putting them on the picnic table. There's this big giant skeleton that they always take with them on their camping trips, the older couple, and I'm like, what the fuck is going on with this? And there's like light decision making where it's like, where do you place the skeleton? Like, do you want to have him by the tree, or do you want to have him lying by these rocks? And I was like, I'll put them by the rocks. And I'm like, why is this here? And then later on it gets explained like, oh, this glowing skeleton is really helpful at night when you can't find your campsite, and like it will help you find your way back to it. So this seemingly silly element, which is actually kind of fun and like almost reveals something about the relationship between those two, also has like a practical reason for existing. And like that's a lot of this game, is it's really witty and charming and a little bit off the wall, but at the end of the day it comes down to like some frank conversations and some really interesting ideas explored in a really short space of time, which is very impressive. Again, so like sometimes you're walking around as those characters, and again, very simple, polygonal, clean colors. I did play this on my new monitor, this 1440p monitor, which I talk about a lot in the episode that was lost. I probably won't be talking about it much here because I can't really use that much with my PC being dead. However, I did hook my Switch up to it, and it looked really nice on that screen. Very clean, and so I think it probably works super well in that way. Very crisp. But there's also, when the dialogue is happening, it switches to a screen where it's just a black background with kind of like a white sketch of a character face and their name, and then also the text that they're saying. So it's almost like a silent movie where, you know, you cut between the polygonal stuff and then when they're talking, these kind of static screens. And those screens are very basic, and they do some fun things with them at points in time. Like there's a moment where Maud and her boyfriend Ben are going down to the beach, and they come across some mean teens, and so like the screen just says mean teens, and there's a bunch of faces of all these teens teasing them and stuff like that as they try and get past them. They're like, these are like 16-year-olds versus the 12 or 13-year-olds, and you know how that goes. We've all been to school, so yeah, and it's really charming and witty, and the writing is so good because you instantly get a sense of who all these characters are. You instantly connect with Maud and know, and this is M-O-R-D is how you spell it, not M-A-U-D, which saying it sounds like the olden name Maud, but it's M-O-R-D, which is, I've never heard that name before. Sounds like death, Mort, but I'm not sure if there's any connection there. And she is very rambunctious, just like curious, asking questions all the time, funny. Like, she almost has like, and I know this isn't probably Abby Russell's full personality, but like sometimes when Abby was on camera at Giant Bomb, she'd have this kind of like very upbeat persona, and that's kind of the vibe that I was getting from Maud quite a lot in this game. And
Abby's like a 12-year-old, okay.
Yeah, no, well, yeah, they always made the jokes, didn't they? It's like, I'm 13 years old.
I know what you mean. She's actually like acts a bit younger.
Yeah.
And I don't know,
I was born in like 2013 or something stupid, right? And then her boyfriend Ben is like very kind of withdrawn. Like he's got kind of nerd glasses on. He's almost a little stereotypical to some degree, but he's very curious and very alert and kind of aware of his surroundings. And a lot of the conversations that happen are about relationships. So there's a moment where Ben and Brad are going to get logs for the campfire, and Ben's like, do you know that 50% of marriages end in divorce? I think my parents are getting divorced. And then Brad's like, oh, okay, guy who I've not really talked to, this young kid, trying to like figure out this, navigate this conversation. And Ben's like, yeah, I think you and Chloanne will be okay, because like if my parents are going to get divorced, then you guys will be fine, because that's 50-50, right? And it's very funny, but also disarming in a way. And Ben also continues that vibe when they're sitting around the campfire telling like horror stories at night. And I really love the way it's done, because sometimes the camera will kind of just sit in a place, and you'll use the analog stick to flick between everyone's different perspectives. So you flick around and you see Brad sitting there, you flick around, you see Chloanne, and you flick around, you see Ben and Maud. And so you kind of can flick around in a circle, and if they have something to say, their name will pop up, so it shows you can interact with them. And so there's this one scene where Ben is just telling this horrible story about rats in a sink, and like how they were coming up every day and he was feeding them, and they came back and more came, and eventually they attacked him and stuff. And as it's getting escalating and going more and more absurd and disgusting, you can see the faces, because he pauses the story, or at least the game pauses the story, and you can flick around and look at everyone's faces as they go through, and like these two adults are just like getting more and more like concerned, and like, what the fuck is this kid telling us? It's just like, how is this 12-year-old telling this disgusting story? And then Maud it cuts to, and she's like leaning in, and she's like, yeah, tell me about it, tell me what the fuck's going on in this. And it's a really smart way to convey the feelings of the characters while this moment is happening, that I think you just wouldn't get in any other medium, right? Like, video games are so unique in being able to play with spaces and angles and stuff like that, that the player controls.
Especially in the moment, where I feel like TV or film, it has to build to something more meaningful all the time, especially in like condensed films. And, you know, but you're right, video games can just live in the moment, be funny, and have great character interactions without it feeling like it has to lead to something.
And you could have done this scene in a movie, right, where you put the cuts on the characters, but I think there's something special to the video game where I didn't need to go around in a circle and take a look if I didn't want to. If I wanted to, I could just have focused on the story, kept the camera on Ben the whole time, and just gone through that, and I wouldn't have even known. But I think the idea that you have the choice to go around and take a look after every beat is a really cool thing, and it's just very well pulled off. There's a moment where you go down to the beach and it's really chill at night, and you're doing some cartwheels and you're trying to figure out how to cartwheel. There's a conversation where Chloanne and Brad go up onto this hill, and they're kind of trying to figure out their relationship in terms of, she doesn't want to have kids, he kind of is getting pressured by his mother to have them, and so they're having this conversation, and there's not really any resolution to that, and there really shouldn't be, right? Because it's just this one conversation that's happening throughout the course of whatever their life is. And I like that it touches lightly on a lot of these topics, but doesn't necessarily provide answers or provide any kind of solutions. But what it does do is it makes this it gives you this mirror of these young kids who are in a relationship, these older couple who are in a relationship, and what's the relationship between those two, in between all of them, and how can that responsibility for the older couple be like, okay, does this inform our decision making for whether we maybe want to have kids, and things like that. So overall, Fantastic game. I got it super cheap on the eShop. It was on sale for like £2 or something ridiculous. And again, like only takes an hour. I played it in an evening, and I would really recommend it highly. I think it is a really one of my favorite narrative games I've played. It has kind of like the wit and charm of A Night in the Woods, not the cutting social commentary in the same way, but some really great stuff in there. And yeah, awesome. I would check it out.
I need to check it out.
It's called Wide Ocean Big Jacket.
Wide Ocean Big Jacket. That is in my brain 1 year and already gone.
It's gone. You don't remember it anymore, Bally. Well, that's going to close us out for the first segment of the show. Thanks, everybody, for sticking with us. We'll be back after the break for some of your emails. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the second segment of today's show. It's time for emails. We had some people write in with some questions, some emails. If you would like to send an email, please send it to thisnintendolife@gmail.com. That's thisnintendolife@gmail.com. You can also post a comment, a question in our Discord server. We have a channel dedicated just for emails, so link to that in the description and on our Twitter account. Our first email this week is from Jay, who's from Buffalo in the United States. Hey guys, I really enjoy the show. Keep up the awesome content. My favorite genre of games are racing games, but I feel the genre has gotten so stale and there aren't a ton of racing games released, not even from the indies. How would you fix this genre? What ideas would you add to Mario Kart 9? My idea is to make Mario Kart 9 more like a NASCAR game with huge tracks and 40 karts racing at a time. There could be a career mode with 30 plus races in a season. You start off with a crummy kart and gradually improve your parts over multiple seasons. And also, please don't make it open world. I hate racing games where you spend more time looking at the minimap to figure out the turns than the track itself. Burnout Paradise, I'm looking at you. Thanks guys, Jay.
Thanks, Jay. I am not the person who should be answering this question, so I'm going to throw directly to Bally, who is our resident expert. Bally, out there on the track right now, watching the new race. How's it going out there on the ever-going track of life, Bally?
Yeah, I split racing games into two categories: the more photorealistic, your realistic games that are both arcadey and simmy, and I think that arguably that genre is in a league of its own, where you've got the dirt games, the other Codemaster games, the F1 series. You can throw in stuff like Forza Horizon, Forza Motorsport, and all those sort of rally games as well. And yeah, I think that industry appeals to its market and is going well, and I don't know much more about it than that. But
it seems like it's chugging along, right? It seems like the people who buy those games continue to buy those games, and they don't change much because the people who buy them like them the way they are, right, and they just continue to like add new cars or improve the visuals.
Yeah,
here's some real-time reflections. There's some ray tracing in them now, that type of thing. So
yeah, and then I'd separate that to the sort of more character racing kart racers like your Mario Karts, your Crash, what's it called? Crash Team Racing, and Sega had their racing game as well. And I'd even throw the less realistic ones, a bit like Wave Race and F-Zero could arguably go in that category as well, the more Nintendo ones. And yeah, I agree that the more kart racer side, you have seen a massive dwindling in kind of the numbers of those games and the number of those good games. I think apparently the Sonic one is really good and Mario Kart 8 is fantastic. And I don't know. My solution, honestly, is like, why is Mario Kart successful? I think it's successful because it's bringing together lots of characters from their own games and putting them on some really cool tracks. And I think in the same...
I would also argue that Mario Kart, really, the reason it's successful, well, I mean, first of all, the IP, it's called Mario, so it's going to sell regardless of what it is. But secondly, it's just accessible, right? Like, you look at these other games, the Forza series, Gran Turismo, all those things, people look at them and they're like, oh, I need to know how to like do gear shifts and shit and like be in first person in a cockpit sometimes, and that's just not appealing to a wide market, right? Like most people...
Yeah, I mean, I think that's on the extreme end where, yes, sometimes there will be like gear shifts and an emphasis on first person, but a series like Forza I think is successful because it is more third person, and you don't need automatic gear shift. Like there is plenty of arcadiness about it, and I think that a lot of the other ones are... There's even like arcade modes in the more realistic games as well. Like you don't have to have necessarily gear shifts, but I agree that Mario Kart is much more accessible.
It's just like you can drift if you want, but even that you don't necessarily need. Like they even have a mode in there for you don't even have to steer properly; it will steer for you, right? So right. There's like a party feel to Mario Kart, as well as it's just bright, colorful, welcoming, high brand association. Just it has all the check mark boxes, plus super incredibly polished, and obviously on a system that is selling hotcakes. It's just kind of primed to do well versus these other ones which have had good attempts in the past. Like there have been kart races of, as we've mentioned, these other kind of mascot platformers, but no one really comes for the king. Mario Kart's the king for a reason.
Yeah, and I'd love to see developers, publishers that have more brands just be a bit more bold about making a solid kart racer using them. I know there was like a Sackboy racer, but I think that's part of the problem. Like, you got to be bolder than Sackboy Racer. It should be like Sony Racer, PlayStation Racer. Like, it needs to be bigger, bring together more worlds, and have more characters where people can be like, hey, that's Kratos in a car. That's hilarious. Let's play that.
Yeah.
But
that's the thing, right? Like, I take a look at Sony's stable, and all those IPs are so much more serious and not suited to that kind of thing. The thing that works about Mario Kart, and the reason Nintendo can throw Splatoon people in there and Link in there and stuff, is that all of their worlds are cartoony and, like, off the wall, and none of them live in a kind of very serious real-world analog, as opposed to The Last of Us, or Uncharted, or Ghost of Tsushima, right? Like, none of these... You can't like pop Jin into a little car and watch him go. I mean, you could do that. You could make it like so that the art style is cohesive and like make it a bit fun and that type of thing. But I think it's not necessarily a betrayal of the source material, but it just doesn't fit in the same way. I think it's kind of why PlayStation All-Stars flopped on its ass, is because none of that really came together to work.
I think there's lots of reasons that game flopped. One being it's just a bad fighting game.
Well, yeah, that too.
But also I do think that you're right. Sony, the vast majority of their properties are very photorealistic, very serious, similar types of games. But, they still have Astrobot, they still got Sackboy. And when you look at a game like Smash Brothers that can bring together cartoony art styles together with more photorealistic art styles and almost unify them under a single art style, I do believe it can be done. I don't think it's easy, and I think it would be hard. But I just think the bigger and bolder you go and the more properties you bring together, combined with a good racing game, a kart racer, I think there's more scope for other companies, not just Nintendo and Mario Kart, to do well in this genre.
Yes.
Yeah, it's tricky. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, and I think you're right. What was it called? PlayStation Stars Royale or something? Yeah,
exactly. The fact that you don't remember the name probably speaks volumes.
Yeah, I mean, But yes, yeah, the fact that bombed so hard, they have probably been terrified and thought, how can we actually bring our properties together in a meaningful way? And I think Astro's Playroom is the answer to that question, to be honest.
Yeah, no, totally. That's kind of what they did, isn't it? That's almost their Nintendo Land, right?
Right.
And it works, and I like that. And that makes sense. Astro is actually a really good candidate, right? Like, Astro Kart is totally way more feasible to me, and you could pull it off by just having the Astros in costumes from those series, right? So instead of having Kratos, you just have an Astrobot that's dressed up like Kratos, like you see in Playroom, right? Like, that's probably Sony's easiest avenue into this space, is just using Astrobot as a vehicle to get there.
Yeah, and that would make it much easier to develop from in that artistic style that we were talking about, if that's because what Smash Brothers does is quite unique in the video game sphere, and is impressive the way that they pull that off. It's interesting what Jay says about the NASCAR idea, where having played Forza Motorsport 7, they're the ones who actually seem to have the current NASCAR license, because there's some NASCAR things in that game, both tracks and cars and races, which is interesting. And yeah, driving around in a big loop when it's not Baby Park isn't the most fun all the time, honestly. But I do think a series like F-Zero does NASCAR in a way where it is like 30, 40 drivers when it comes to like a game like GX. And I think, you know, mass number of drivers can work and is fun. So that's also an idea that you can go down. It just maybe wouldn't work for a game like Mario Kart 9, where how many races was 8? Is it 12? And that was like already an increase from 8.
I think 16 maybe.
16?
I can't remember.
Yeah, I can't remember.
It was a lot.
So they could I totally love it. The higher they go, I think the larger and longer that pack, it can be more fun. You just obviously have to get the items balanced better, which I think Mario Kart 8 sometimes fails at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what do you think about shaking up the ways in which racing games are done, right? Like he's talking about these big races and stuff like that. I'm a big fan of, you know, trying something like a battle royale in a racing game. I think that, you know, taking Mario Kart and having 100 races, or like whatever franchise, like having 100 and then just dumping them down, going on a big race. And, I don't know, like eliminating people along the way, but then whoever wins can be the winner either. Like there's lots of ways you can do it, and translating that style, because it's a popular thing right now, right?
Totally, and I really like the point-to-point races they introduced into Mario Kart 8, like that like Mount Wario, and I think they turned the original Rainbow Road from N64 into like a point-to-point. And
they actually did have those tracks in the 3DS game in 7, because there's the Woohoo Island ones, which are also really point-to-point.
Cool. So I love the idea of, why not make it a point-to-point race with like 6 or 9 or 12 or 16 points, you know? And as you say, just keep going, and you could have like an eliminator style thing like Battle Royale, or there's definitely things you can do.
See, this is where we bring back Double Dash, Bally, but instead it's called Quadruple Dash, and there's 4 people in a car, and that's the Battle Royale for you. You've got to have a squad of 4, right?
4 people.
Yeah, you got to have like a squad of 4, and they drop onto the map in their car, and then like someone is, you know, doing the shooting, someone is driving, some other person is doing some other thing. You got to come up with other ideas with the other 2 people, because we need to find some other ways for them to do things.
Yeah, yes. I mean, I'd love them to roll the dice, because Mario Kart 8 is a fantastic Mario Kart game and arguably my favorite alongside Double Dash, but it's a very safe game. Like, sure, it's got the maglev kind of flying thing that it's got going on where you're hovering, and that's cool, but like it's not as big of a deal as I think Nintendo think it is. And you know, mission mode in the DS game and 2 racers on a cart in Double Dash, I would argue, are like the biggest shake-ups in the Mario Kart series generally. So I'd love to see them shake it up mechanically. And sure, we want the smash-ification of Mario Kart. We want more characters, more tracks, more Nintendo worlds brought into that game for sure. But I do hope they do something fundamentally different than, hey, is everyone on a cart and here are the same weapons that we've had for, you know, last 3 games. Like, let's have some different weapons, different characters, and yeah, who knows? I don't know. It's I really hope that we kind of get Mario Kart 9 fairly soon, and I want them to go bold.
Yeah. And in terms of the indie scene when it comes to these types of games, I think that they are just, they're out there, but they're in different forms and they're more creative, right? You're not going to get an indie team trying to make something like Forza, because it's just not feasible for them to do like big open world, or for them to do like get licensing for hundreds of cars. Like, it's just not going to happen. So that's where you end up with the more arcadey style of stuff like Horizon Chase Turbo, which is a game on Switch that loads of people love, and I'm kind of interested in picking up at some point. You know, or even, you know, Fast Racing Neo, stuff like that. And I mentioned this before as well, but Lonely Mountains Downhill is a game that is not really a racing game, but has that type of feel to it. There's also the Descenders I've heard about, which is another biking game that has those kind of vibes.
On Game Pass, I believe, actually.
Yeah, and I haven't checked that out. I don't know what that's like. But what I'm getting at is, right, these studios, these indie, outfits are not going to be making your traditional racing games anyway. They are kind of going a bit more out there and making stuff that is tangential, but also, you know, different. I think it's like Race the Sun. You know, like Race the Sun was a procedural like almost endless Star Foxy type racing thing that wasn't really a race. It was just like see how far you can get without dying. And can you classify that as racing? Maybe not, but I do think it's still within the same ballpark, but just playing with different ideas, you know.
And it's cool because they've not got these big brands, all the car licenses or the brand of Mario, you know, they are forced to do something more interesting and unique with their racing, driving, sport games, whatever you want to call them. Really exciting. Shall we move on to the next email?
Yes, absolutely.
Our next email is from Daniel Tanusi, who says, "Greetings from the Netherlands. No, I am not Simon. Awesome show you have put together. I appreciate you producing a quality Switch gaming podcast to listen to at work. I have 2 questions that I would love to hear you answer or discuss. I have had the Switch for a while now, but as a big RPG and RTS fan and a frame rate freak at the same time, I would like to hear your opinions on a couple of points. Which are, in your opinion, the best non-turn-based RPG and RTS games on the system right now, excluding Breath of the Wild and Diablo 3 on the RPG side? I've heard most of the RTSs on the Switch are actually very poor in the frame rate department, and that is a no-go for me."
So, I don't have good news for you, my friend. I really don't. And it's sad for me to report this, but it is the truth. All games that try to be these big PC things on Switch are doomed to have terrible frame rates. So I feel like you're at a place where these things are incompatible. You want to play these games on Switch, but you're also a frame rate freak. And that just is not, it's like fucking trying to fit oil and water. They will never merge, right? They are just going to slide along across each other, and it's not going to happen. So it's rough out there. And I think it's really weird and interesting that we get so many of these types of games put out on the system, right? Like Civilization 6, I don't know if you count that as an RTS or as a 4X game or whatever you want to classify it as. I kind of put these all in kind of a same lump of like PC things I don't know much about, so I kind of look at them as the same thing. Like City Skylines, that type of thing. Those come out and they exist, whether you should play them or not, and a different issue. I guess they must sell, right? Like, I guess just Civilization on brand awareness and name alone will just get people to give them money.
Or sells enough, I think, I guess. They might have had they might have said, like, right, if we put this on Switch, I reckon we could get this number, and that number might be very low, but it's still surpassing that number, you know?
Right. And it's really interesting as well, is because these types of games are kind of built for multiple powers of laptop or PC, just because, you know, a lot of people, there's a wide range of people who play stuff like The Sims or stuff like, you know, Civilization type games on like lower end systems, and so they should be scalable down to less powerful hardware. And yet when they put them on the Switch, they still seem to have all these issues. City Skylines is like a great example of just a terrible port that has been a disaster, and I don't think has been addressed really or fixed in any way. And that sucks. That sucks for people. It sucks for fans out there. But I can't really think of many other like actual RTS games out there, right? Like, I don't think Age of Empires is on Switch, even if that is counted as an RTS, or is that 4X? This is my problem. My issue is I don't actually really know what RTS games are big out there now. I know StarCraft is an RTS. I don't know if there are any other big ones currently in the market. It seems like a genre that has kind of died in some ways. I'm not that helpful, unfortunately, with this question. And I'm not sure Bally will be either.
I've not really played any RTSs either, honestly. And my biggest friend...
come on now, Bally. You've played the Gungan Swamp Star Wars game on your computer. Now, that was a bona fide RTS, right?
See, I would class that more as 4X in the sense that, like, RTS...
City building or stuff like that.
I see as your... RTS I see as you've got units that you're using to go and attack other units. I class 4X as more you're predominantly building,
right, like
things.
Like the Total War games, that type of thing in some senses.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if any of those are on the Switch, but I'd imagine if they tried to put them on there, it'd be really, really bad. And part of it is the small screen in handheld mode, which makes it tricky to see tiny units. Even when I was playing some Total War Rome on my computer, I was like, there's a lot of fucking people on this screen, and they're tiny, and I can barely see them attacking, and I have to zoom in really close to see them actually doing anything. And it was complicated. I think the touchscreen mitigates some of that stuff, right? Like highlighting people, sending them into different places. Would you classify Bad North as an RTS in some ways?
Definitely, yeah. It's about like units versus enemy units. I'd define it as, yeah.
Yeah. So I think, again, like the indie space is doing these ideas on a system that can actually handle them, right? Like Bad North is a small game with a small scope that will run on Switch and is a good RTS. It's a roguelike as well, but it is like playing in those spaces, right?
Yeah, it's a really awesome game. I'd highly recommend Bad North. It's also on Game Pass, I think. I think my other
cool.
reference is a game like Pikmin 3, which I just think like plays on RTS themes, even though it's kind of like it's got Metroid elements in there as well. But Nintendo's take on RTS definitely shouldn't be missed if you're on a Switch and you're into RTSs. It's a fantastic game.
Yeah, totally. And that is probably the premier one on the system. Surprising nobody, Nintendo just taking it and doing a totally different thing, but still classified somewhat under the same genre. And when it comes to RPGs, like non-turn-based ones, I think this is definitely where you fare a little bit better on the Switch, right? I think of a lot of Western stuff like Witcher 3, which is on the system and is a good version, and people seem to like that quite a bit. Again, if you're a frame rate freak, that might annoy you because it's not going to be 60, it will be 30, but still, I hear it holds up quite well. Bally, I know you've watched Summer Caroline play that on Switch as well.
Yeah, and ultimately, Witcher 3 is still 30 on Xbox One and PlayStation 4. Like, it's only...
That's true, yeah.
It's only PCs and next gen. Well, it's not even on next gen yet in that sense, but... It runs as well on Switch as these other systems. I think it just looks a little more ugly is the only thing. It's not quite as detailed. But it looks good from what I've seen.
And that's the trade-off you pay for having it on a handheld system, right? Like, that's kind of the way it goes. And I'm sure on the handheld screen, it probably actually looks really good. Maybe a little bit of blur on it, but it's not going to ruin the experience necessarily, which is good to see. And then stuff like Dragon's Dogma, a game which I hear so many people praise and talk about, which I would love to check out at some point. Also a really good version on the Switch, so that type of stuff is out there. Divinity is one that I would say I do think it is kind of turn-based though, because it's a CRPG, so it's a different isometric perspective. But it has like, I guess, almost part real time. I'm not sure how the combat, like, I guess is almost XCOM style in a way, but slightly different. There's this point to which CRPGs and strategy games kind of cross over in their combat. I think mainly of Shadowrun Dragonfall, which is one of the only CRPGs I've played, where the combat is very XCOM style, but the gameplay is much more of a RPG thing where you're running around environments, talking to people, doing dialogue checks, that type of thing. So if you're looking for something that isn't traditional JRPG, then yeah, Divinity is definitely a good thing to check out, and it does have cross progression between PC and Switch. So if you have it on your PC, you can also take it with you and keep your save data, which is a neat feature that everyone needs to do. I know Hades introduced it recently, and I hadn't bought Hades on PC yet, but I think with my new monitor, when my new one comes in, I think I might just buy Hades again on Steam and play it in 1440, because I need to see Hades at 144 frames at 1440p. That's what I need to live with, Bally. I was playing Hades yesterday, for God's sake. I beat it twice yesterday. I'm up to 46 wins in Hades. The game never ends. It's so good. I still have stuff to do. It's amazing.
Just won BAFTA's Game of the Year.
Yes, absolutely. Anyway, Hades is not an RPG, but everyone should play it. So yeah, I don't know. I don't have any other real recommendations for RPGs. I'm trying to think if there's stuff like Darkest Dungeon, which again is, I guess, technically turn-based, but also has roguelike elements to it. I'm just thinking of stuff that is more traditionally PC-focused, right? Like, this question seems to be asking, like, what PC games are there that would be good on Switch? And that's kind of, there are some out there. I think you're going to come across stuff that is better than others. But again, you do have older stuff on there as well. You can look at Baldur's Gate, Icewind Dale, all those old ones that they released. Planescape Torment, I think, might be on there now. Classic RPGs that probably have not aged particularly well, but are there. Pillars of Eternity, I think, is on Switch now as well. The second one, maybe. So, yeah, they exist. They're out there. The things. Skyrim, obviously. Skyrim, the biggest one of them all. And arguably, I would say one of the best ports on Switch. And obviously, again, it's not going to be 60. One of the first games we ever saw run on a Switch in that first initial ad.
That was such a reveal in that trailer. I was like, what?
That was maybe the reveal that defined the Switch for me more than anything else, of like, oh, it might be different this time, right? Like, that was definitely an eye-opening thing and very, very cool. But Skyrim is one of the better ports on the system. So yeah, again, if you're looking for a turn-based RPG and you've never played Skyrim, well, it's here, and it's a good version. So that's comes with very high recommendation from me as someone who's played the Switch version and put 50 hours into it and still has loads to do. And I would like to go back to Skyrim at some point. So there we go.
Daniel's second part of his question says, also, on episode 173, MBZ says he would love to see some cross-save possibilities between the Switch devices and consoles. The PS3, PS4 had such flexibility with the PS Vita. I myself have played a lot of Helldivers on the PS4 and continued my progress on the Vita when on vacations abroad, but unfortunately the Vita failed. With that said, do you think Nintendo would consider making the Switch Pro as a more powerful Switch dedicated as a home console for you to play at home, and the Switch to be the more versatile console for you to play away from home when you're on the go? Many thanks, guys. Daniel.
Thanks, Daniel. So this is interesting because this kind of coincides with some Bloomberg reporting that has come out recently regarding what everyone is referring to as the Switch Pro, and it doesn't seem like Daniel's idea here is going to line up. Although it is interesting, right, that we just talked about some cross-save games that obviously not from the same system, but from PC or other consoles to Switch, with Hades and with Divinity. Which is cool, but yeah, it's almost in that sense like your PC is your home console and your Switch is your handheld. Right. You just have to own two different ecosystems and two different versions of the game, pay for it twice in order to do that, which is kind of not what he's getting at here, which is more like, hey, you buy it once and you have it across two places, which would be ideal. And I just think the real issue there for Nintendo, just to cover this point, is their account system stuff is stupid and doesn't work in that way. And there you can do a secondary Switch and you can make it so that your Switch Lite is the one that has access, but you need to make sure that that's the primary one, because that's the one that will most likely not have internet access, and make your secondary one the one at home, because that will be able to ping to make sure that it can access the stuff or not. It's a bit of a mess, is basically what I'm getting at. And I think even if Nintendo were to do a base station home console thing, it would continue to be a mess and you wouldn't get your dream of cross-save, essentially, is what I'm saying. So
even when the Switch Pro comes out, they're going to want you to bring that thing with you, and then when you're at home, you dock it. And like, I think that's what they're really going for, even though they're, with the Switch Lite, they're making slimmer and lighter handhelds to go. And you're right, lots of people will want the ability to pick up a Switch Lite, have the Switch Pro for at home, Switch Lite for on the go. And yeah, I wouldn't hold my breath for making Nintendo sync those two up anytime soon. And I mean, they are synced up as it will stand, but not in a meaningful way.
Yeah, but it kind of feels like a jank solution that people have just figured out how to break the system almost, right? Like,
right.
It's not smooth and it's not ideal, basically, is the way it is. However, we do have news of a potential Switch Pro that is coming. And there's been a bunch of different reports recently. This one seems to have the most smoke surrounding it from Bloomberg. Takashi Mochizuki, who is a reporter who has been doing great work on the video game industry for a while, and quite specifically a lot of Nintendo stuff he reports on. And this basically says the new one will be coming this year, I believe, and it is going to be 4K compatible, but that is through, as we had discussed before, Bally, I think you were the first person to bring this up, actually, through NVIDIA's DLSS technology, which, can you remember, Bally, what DLSS stands for? Because we did talk about it the other day, and I don't know if it stayed in your brain or not. Let's see the time of truth.
I'll admit, I'm looking at the article you're looking at, and it stands for
Bally.
Deep Learning Super Sampling.
Yes, which basically means algorithmically faking 4K, which is, it's actually kind of impressive in a way that I didn't expect, because you hear about upscalers all the time and like, oh yeah, I can make this look better by just like putting a bit of juice into it. I think the PS4 Pro and stuff kind of did that with checkerboard 4K, right? And that's fine. This is much more impressive because it's almost indistinguishable, right? Like, you can almost not even tell the difference between real 4K and NVIDIA's like algorithmic 4K. The basic idea is you can take a resolution, say 1080p, and you can say DLSS that shit, and it will take that 1080p thing. It will still run it at however much power is needed to run 1080p, but the algorithm will just shoot it up to 4K, essentially. And I was looking on Reset Era, and there was this thread showing, like, here are 2 screenshots from Control. One is DLSS 4K, one is real 4K. Can you tell the difference? And I looked at those pictures for like 5 minutes, and I could not find any difference between them. They looked identical. And of course, you know, this is a screenshot on a forum on the internet. This is not me looking at a TV screen. But this person was being like, look, on my screen, I can barely tell the difference, right? So for me, it's actually a really clever way for Nintendo to sidestep the whole, we're charging super high amount of money for a ridiculously powerful piece of hardware that's handheld that can also do real 4K, which, let's be frank, that would cost like £1,000, versus this, where they can bump the price a little bit, which I believe the report is up to $400 versus $300 for the original Switch, and yet still get the same kind of visual fidelity that they're seeing from their competition, which feels like a bit of a cheat in a way that works for Nintendo. But also I'm skeptical because Nintendo doesn't tend to follow trends like this. So I'm interested what you think, Bally.
Yeah, I think it's exciting that it will be docked 4K, and we've said it before, but it's almost like Nintendo being dragged kicking and screaming to just kind of follow along. And it does feel like they're under more market pressure because arguably alongside Sony right now, they are the market leaders when it comes to sort of system sales, and they've not been in that position for a very long time, since the Wii, where they basically had zero interest in ever like doing anything HD with the Wii originally. And I think there is more pressure on them now to be more in line when it comes to tech. And the biggest difference between the Switch and the Wii, I think, is those third-party ports, and you know, the likes of the Witcher, Skyrim, and all the games we've been talking about. And sure, they're not a huge pillar of that system, but I think it's still an important part of the Switch, and ensuring that they actually have the graphical capability to keep up. And it's not just those sort of big third parties, but it's also like third-party indies are getting a bit fancier as well. When you look at games like The Pathless that would probably struggle to run on the base Switch, but you could imagine would look a bit better. Yeah,
or even something like Kenna Bridge of Spirits coming out, which is ostensibly an indie game, right?
These indie games just are looking bigger and more beautiful than ever, and you know, you need the hardware to play those games. And Kenna and The Pathless are perfect examples of games that traditionally would have been on Nintendo systems, but probably when there's disparity in the tech, probably aren't going to be at this point in time. So they probably need that extra power to just, you know, keep up a bit. And I think the fact that it's going to be,
or they could be on the Switch, but they would be underwhelming versions of those games,
yeah,
right?
And having played The Pathless on PS5 in like 60 frames per second with 4K, it's like, this looks fantastic. Like, this is third-person open world game that just looks glorious, and you really get that added impact, especially on games of that genre, you know, which I think is important. I think it's also really cool that the handheld is going to be an OLED display. I think you said the Vita was OLED, and it looked really great.
The Vita is, yeah. So the Vita, the original model, is OLED. The second one, the second iteration they put out, I think is the Slim, maybe, got rid of the OLED display. So I have an original model Vita. I actually bought it like right before the Slim came out. So I kind of got one of the last OLED Vitas out there, which is nice. Unfortunately, it has one big scratch across it, which fucking sucks. And I never changed that, of course. And I might need to go and get on the Vita store and download whatever shit I need to buy on there, because that's going away soon, and that's bad. So yeah, a bit of a bummer, but so it seems like the screen's going to be slightly larger, and I think IGN did a mock-up that I showed you, which was basically like they theoretically could keep the Joy-Cons the same size, basically increasing the screen to just get rid of the bevel around the Switch screen and just make the thing almost entirely screen. Bezel, sorry. God, bezel, basil brush? Well, I don't fucking know. Too many words, English. And that reads correct to me in the sense that Nintendo clearly don't give a fuck about Joy-Cons being bad, and will continue probably to put out a system which has the same Joy-Cons, and will just try and wash their hands of it. And I hope that some fucking lawsuit happens soon. I know there's one in progress right now against them for Joy-Con shit, but they need to be taken to task, because it's abhorrent. It's really just bullshit. And I think this would be a chance for them to fix the situation. I don't have trust that they're going to do that, you know? So
yeah, the Joy-Con situation is horrendous, and yeah, it'd be really great if they were held their feet to the fire on that one, because it's really bad. But yeah, overall, I think this is great news. I look forward to potentially buying a Switch Pro end of this year if that's when it's going to come. And, you know, I think Breath of the Wild 2 4K, even if it's 30 frames per second, is going to look fantastic. And that's a very exciting prospect that I didn't think I was going to get from Nintendo anytime soon. So, you know, I think
real
it's
question,
cool.
Bally. Will they scale to 1440p, right? Like, is that going to be in their plans? That's what I want.
I think
right?
Nintendo will scale to 1440p when in like 50 years time, you know, like I think it's
right. Go backwards.
Yeah,
yes,
they're gonna be a long way away from that.
Oh boy. Okay. Well, I can dream. You know, it's definitely a possibility. But yeah.
Yeah, thanks very much for your email, Daniel, and also thank you to Jay for your email as well. That's all we've got time for emails on this segment of today's show. But as I said at the top of the segment, if you would like to send an email into the show, please email thisnintendolife@gmail.com. That's thisnintendolife@gmail.com, or post a comment, a question in our Discord server on that channel. We're going to take a break right now, and after the break, MBZ is going to test me with the Jukebox. We will be right back.
Mwahaha. All right, everyone, welcome back to the third and final part of today's show. It's time, baby. It's back. It's the Jukebox. It's time to jump around and dance and shimmy and shake and all those good things, and listen to some good video game music. You know, last time I did this and tested Bally, I was just about the good vibes, you know, making some really nice tunes and listening and just not really having much of a challenge.
Some easy throws you gave me last time.
I did, yeah, but you know what? Bally fought back and gave me some dirty, nasty shit. So it's time for revenge. I haven't been like super evil, but there are some tricky ones in here, and I think it's
looking back on the previous 10 rounds. Generally speaking, I think I am way harsher to you than vice versa. So I deserve whatever I have coming for me, basically.
Okay, good. Well, we'll see how it goes. Bally has already ruined one of my picks because for some reason I got spoiled from an image, so that's great. So I've got a new one, but hopefully we'll be okay. For the listeners at home, Bally, who don't know how this works, what we're doing here, do you want to give them a bit of rundown?
MBZ is going to play 5 different songs from video games, and I have to guess what video game that song is from. I can try and guess what the song is. That might get me like some respect, but it's just the game I need. That's just the game. Crucial one. And these
games are ones that you have played / are on Nintendo systems.
Yes, I have played, and they are on Nintendo systems. And no game that has appeared on Jukebox before can appear again.
Yes. So we've already done Mario Strikers. Bally got it wrong. I can never bring it back again. That's how it works. Until we change the rules.
Until we run out of games or we want to mix it up. But for now, those are the rules.
Yeah. Cool. Well, let's get it underway. Also, you can play along at home. Keep track. Let us know how you do on Twitter or on the Discord or whatever, and let us know your scores over there. And we're going to get started with track number 1. Let's take a listen. Starting off with a banger out the gate. A bit of a tricky one. Take me on a journey, Bally. How's that gone through your head?
I was thinking initially, this is Minish Cap. It has to be Minish Cap. But I think Minish Cap is on the done list. I
believe so. I'm not sure.
It is on the done list.
Okay.
So I was thinking Zelda Town themes, but from like alternate Zelda games. When I say alternate, I mean like the lesser known. So Minish Cap, maybe like a Triforce Heroes. That one's definitely not been done before.
Yeah,
but then I was thinking like it's far too kind of. It went a bit Mario-y at the end, and I was going along the lines of like Mario parties.
Okay.
But then it had the sound quality sounded like DS, I want to say, which goes against both Minish. Well, it can't be Minish Cap. It could be Triforce. It goes against Triforce Heroes in a way because the sound quality didn't sound quite up there. So I'm thinking more DS.
Okay.
And then I'm thinking,
I like this train of thought. It's going in some different places.
Okay, what's like a happy clappy Mario or Zelda game on DS that's not? But it was too like clean and crisp to be like a Spirit Tracks or something. So I'm heading more towards the party games.
Okay. Do you think this is what are we thinking? A handheld game or a console game? What do you think?
It sounds more handheld, but for some reason I want to say it's a console game.
Okay.
Because I can't think of the relevant handheld. Or maybe it's like Monkey Ball something. And then it's like RPG vibes. Crap. This is It's like what I did to you with Mario Odyssey with Shiveria.
Yes.
It's like
exactly.
It's the style of song that is in so many different types of games that are.
It's a very Nintendo-esque type of song, right? Like it could be in any Nintendo style game, right?
Yes. It's not Mario Party. I'm not feeling Mario Party. And it feels older than Triforce Heroes, but I can't think of what it would be that's not Triforce Heroes.
I'm gonna give you 30 seconds.
Okay, well, I know I'm wrong, but I think I'm going to go with Triforce Heroes.
Triforce Heroes for the Nintendo 3DS family of systems.
Yes.
Your final answer?
Yes.
That is incorrect, and you touched on the franchise because you mentioned a name in there, and I went silent after you mentioned it.
Okay.
This is a DS game, and it is Super Monkey Ball Touch and Roll for the Nintendo DS.
Wow. Okay, that is a strong cut because I was feeling Monkey Ball vibes and I felt DS vibes, but I just couldn't quite get there. That is
you just didn't put it together. You said DS to me, you said Monkey Ball to me, and it never came together. But it was that was
and you're
interesting.
Right. I didn't put this on my backlog for some whatever reason, but I did play this game, had a good time, and then I think I traded it in stupidly, like I did with lots of games back in the day.
You don't own it anymore then?
I believe I don't.
Oh, that's a bummer.
But it's a pretty good game.
I don't think this game was great, but it was at the time for Monkey Ball stuff. I was going all about it, right? We both played Banana Blitz on Wii, played this game. Obviously, I owned the original Monkey Ball 2 on GameCube, and I've always been a massive Monkey Ball fan. I want the series to come back. It's been so long that it's been dormant, and what do? They re-released Banana Blitz in HD, and that's not really what people wanted, I think. So. Yeah, it's one of those games that I think did the pseudo 3D thing decently on DS. You know, like I don't think there was any movement mechanics because DS didn't have any gyro built into it, but definitely touchscreen was a lot of the moving in this game, right? It's called Touch and Roll, so that makes sense.
Yeah, and it had like a unique art style for like the Monkey Ball series. Like it was that weird like 2D on 3D kind of look to it, which was. Nice. I think it would age well if you had a look at it now, I reckon.
Yeah. Listening to that soundtrack a little bit, it's, those chips in the DS and GBA weren't amazing. I think the DS was definitely better than GBA. But there's some good tunes in there, definitely some decent stuff from the Monkey Ball soundtrack. It's one of those soundtracks that you kind of like put in the back of your head almost because it becomes a focus and it's just constantly playing as you're just like focusing on the task of nailing it. I think the older Monkey Ball games had a bit of a different vibe to them with the soundtrack, and this one went, as you were saying, a bit more in a happy clappy Nintendo direction, which I think the series has always been on the edge of. But
well done Sega for basically getting a Nintendo song in their game, because that is like crazily you know, Minish Cap town kind of sound to it.
Yeah, so that's the name of it is World 1 Wet and Windy, so it's the World 1 theme, basically. Is that so? There you go. Super
Very
Monkey
good.
Ball, Touch and Roll. Let's move on, Bally, to song number 2.
Wow.
All right.
Tune. What a tune.
That's pretty good. Yeah, it's pretty bopping, pretty
Not
bumping.
to say I know what it's from, but
No.
it's a good tune. Right,
not.
let's get the logic in gear. So
Yes.
I feel like it sounds like 80s rock, but this is a thing in video games where I think a lot of 90s video games sounded like 80s rock. And
Yes.
I think games like F-Zero went a lot more metally and faster rock. But I think a game that also did rock in its own way and tried to be cool at the time are like the Sonic games.
Okay.
And I think that because I've played so few Sonic games, it's probably not a Sonic game. And that the sound quality sounds like it's trying to be like a Sonic game. And that means that I think it's a modern game.
Okay.
And then I think, what game tries to emulate Sonic that had a kick-ass soundtrack that sounded like Sonic, but arguably better in my view? And I think back to when I played Freedom Planet on the Wii U.
Ooh, okay.
So my logic for how I got to Freedom Planet feels very secure, and I can't really see other strands. It kind of also sounds like other 2D platformers, so like Donkey Kong Country perhaps, but there's just something about it that is a bit too metal and not rocky enough for Donkey Kong in some way, and it's not quite David Wise, it's someone else, you know. So I'm gonna stick with Freedom Planet. Final answer.
Okay, I like that guess. It's a really good guess. Unfortunately, it's wrong. But you're thinking along some good lines. 80s rock, right? What are some old games? But this is a new game that's not an old game that is using those types of sounds. Thinking about what we're going to do this weekend. When was the last time we did one of those things, which is playing a co-op game together? Can you tell me what this game is now?
Oh, so it's Contra.
Which
3?
would result in the game being
Contra 3.
given no. I'm talking about a new game that is based on nostalgia.
Let me just check my backloggery for this game.
Can't remember the name of the game that we played. It's Blazing Chrome Valley.
Blazing, that's the one. Yes.
I thought it would be fun because we're about to play It Takes Two this weekend, and I think maybe A Way Out was before this, or maybe Blazing Chrome was the last one. I think Blazing Chrome might have been the last co-op.
This was after A Way Out, yeah.
I guess Wild Arms technically was over the
Wild
internet.
Guns.
We did that. Wild Guns, sorry. Wild Arms is a RPG. But yes, this is Blazing Chrome, the Contra-like game. And this is level 4-1, which I imagine we heard a fucking lot of just because we took our time to get through that game. And it was definitely very brutal and challenging, but I had a great time playing this.
Yeah, it's a great game. What year did it come out? 2019, I want to say?
Yeah, maybe it was 2019, I think so.
Had a great time playing this, and a really good modern take on Contra, totally. And yeah, I'm pretty annoyed that I didn't get this one. Like, there's two pretty deep cuts so far, Monkey Ball DS and Blazing Chrome. So I like this challenge. I'll crack it one day. I must admit, I was quite confident with Freedom Planet. So
it was a good guess, honestly. Like, you were going along just a slightly sideways track, and I did look at Freedom Planet and think that was an option potentially for this.
Freedom Planet's a very good soundtrack.
It is a really good soundtrack. Yeah, I think Sonic definitely has those vibes. I don't think it quite goes the same direction that Contra does, and Blazing Chrome is definitely leaning on the Contra style soundtrack for sure.
Yeah. I think that track sounds less heavy than what I envisage Contra in my mind to sound. That's not to say it is less heavy, but
I think part of it is a lot of your brain association with Contra and Blazing Chrome is just bullet sounds that aren't there to over the top to like intensify it almost.
Swearing loudly at the telly, and I'm not really thinking about the soundtrack all the time.
No, I think it's one of those like almost therapeutic things. It's like very beat and rhythmical, and like it doesn't change that much, that song. Like, it's very much like and just repeats itself quite a bit, and that's kind of like the rhythm that they want you to get into, right? Some ways in which music can put you in the mindset of a game, and I think those games do a really good job of that.
But like two crazy popular kind of genres of songs you've gone for so far, where it's like that 90s rock, which is across a lot of classic games and games emulating classic games, and then that kind of Nintendo town sound that Sega just decided to replicate from Monkey Ball DS. So.
Yes. So let's go, I think, for song number 3. See if you can redeem yourself here. This is like, we're coming back to a bit of an easier one here, so hopefully you'll be able to get this one. Let's take a listen to song number 3.
Black smoke's arising and it surely is a train. Surely is a train, boys, surely is a train. Black smoke's arising and it surely is a train. I'm on my long journey home. Lost all my money but a $2 bill. $2 bill, boys, $2 bill. Lost all my money but a $2 bill. I'm on my long journey home.
I love that song.
Great song.
Good. Yeah. So good.
And I think I know what this is from. I believe it takes place at like a moment in this game where is it in the bar or is it elsewhere? But
it's not in the bar, no.
It's not in the bar. But let me say the game first, which is Kentucky Route Zero. Yes,
probably the most underrated soundtrack of last year. And I guess this song technically was from maybe 2014 or 15, whenever the episode it was in came out. Maybe, I can't remember, this might have been from the first episode, so maybe it's even back in 2013. But I think the vocal tracks, the original tracks in this game, are so fucking good that I thought that they were just licensed from somewhere else. Like, I thought they were just like country tracks licensed from somewhere. But they are all original tracks written for this game, and there are multiple of them. And they are so well done, and especially the musical moments.
Because I immediately thought like Red Dead Redemption 2, and then I'm like, well, that's obviously not on the Nintendo system. But then you realize the budget that they paid for that original music versus the size and scope of Kentucky Route Zero, and it's like, wow, that is a crazy impressive soundtrack considering.
It's amazing, yeah. And, you know, there's one at the end where they're kind of standing in that town, and like that's kind of the end cap one that's really amazing. There's the one in the bar where it opens up to the sky. There are a few different vocal tracks throughout this.
When is this one from?
I think it happens either episode 1 or episode 2.
Right.
And I can't remember where, but I think there's a moment where like musicians come into the foreground. You know, that tends to happen a couple of times in the game, where you're walking along and then the music starts building and you just kind of just stand there and listen to it and just like absorb it in. And it really fits with the tone of the game and the way it feels, right? Like I think it does such a good job of embodying the vibes and the feeling of Kentucky Route Zero and what it is trying to accomplish, and just exquisite music, just some of the best stuff last year. And obviously it's going to get overshadowed by like Final Fantasy VII and other big soundtracks that people are going to vote for on Game Awards and those types of things. But I encourage people not to sleep on this soundtrack, because even some of the kind of ambient music, I'm not a bigger fan of that in any way, because I'm not hugely into ambient music, but I think they do a really good job of setting tone with that stuff as well.
Really good. Yeah, I'd say a lot of the ambient music is very minimal in the amount of sounds in it. Like it's very just kind of bings and bongs and not really... Yeah, it's the set piece moments, and you're right, this is from a set piece moment, and I think there's maybe 4, 5, 6 throughout the whole 5 episodes that are just really impressive set piece moments with proper soundtracks that are really impressive.
Yeah, amazing stuff. Cool. Well, there you go. You've got 1 point on the board, Bally.
1 point on the board. Here we go.
You had your high. Now it's time to dive back into hell. Let's listen to song number 4. I can't even remember what this one is, but let's listen and find out. Definitely distinctive, that one. Definitely a type of sound, right? So do you have any thoughts, Bally? Anything to walk through here?
It's like evil. But there's a lot of evil things in video games. That's the tricky part. That's the difficult part.
So lots of bosses and evil people in video games. That is not wrong.
Evil. I'm gonna go JRPG evil.
Okay.
That cuts it down a bit. Oh. See, I want to say Chrono Trigger, but
do you think it's the revenge? If I come back to seek my revenge?
Your reaction suggesting it might not be, but like,
who knows?
Trying to think what other game it could be, and it is kind of like the GBA DS SNES realm.
Okay, which one of those?
That's the problem. That is the
question. That's the issue. That's the issue.
That is the question. Oh man, it's like, it's like what other games have other games I've played with evil parts?
Evil parts. What other games have I played with evil parts?
I don't think it's Earthbound. It is more Chrono Trigger, but we've had Final Fantasy VI, that in my defense, so that's like something to help me. But then I've not played a ton of JRPGs outside of that, unless it's something that's more action based on like the DS. Chrono Trigger feels wrong, but it feels like a logical guess, but it just doesn't sit right with me. I'm
going to give you 30 seconds.
Sorry, I'm on that 30-second counter. Going to go with Chrono Trigger, but I think it's wrong.
It is wrong, sadly, Bally. Very sadly.
Yes.
This is, again, me being a bastard. This is the main theme of an antagonist, so you were on the right lines. It is the antagonist of the game The Legend of Zelda Spirit Tracks for the Nintendo DS. This is Chancellor Cole's theme. I don't know if you remember him. He has green hat, and secretly underneath those hats are horns, because he's a devil serving the evil demon guy. And yeah, it's there's some interesting tracks that have this vibe to them throughout the game, I think, with all the weird train people you meet. You know, you go into those towers and you meet the train people, and I think they all have their own themes, but this is the one for the main antagonist, the evil train guy. And that's what it was.
That's a tough one. That is a tough one.
Yeah.
That was there in the back of my mind somewhere, but there was just no way I was going to put the two together to get it out of my mouth. But yeah, that is tough. That is a good one.
Spirit Tracks, though, an interesting game. I think there are certain, if you took certain tracks from Spirit Tracks and laid them down and listened to them, you'd be like, oh, that's Spirit Tracks straight away. Like you would know, like the train music, right? The train music, as soon as you hear it, is like, oh, I know what game that is instantly. So there are parts of this game that are super recognizable and very Zelda and very obvious. But there are definitely, I think it does have that almost, I want to say, kind of ancient Japanese style. I thought you might guess Okami for this one, because it kind of has a bit of those vibes.
Yeah, and I do think that they go for a Japanese theme with some of the other big bads in Zelda. Definitely the Ganondorf of Wind Waker, for example, has very similar themes, I want to say, and like that he has like these dueling swords and is practically wearing like a kimono, like it's very Japanese inspired. You're right. And yeah, this sounds quite Japanese in that sense as well.
Yeah, it does definitely have a bit of those vibes going on, and it's cool. It's a cool game. I remember liking Spirit Tracks a good deal, and I think if you took the best parts of Spirit Tracks and the best part of Phantom Hourglass and put them together, you would probably have one of the better Zelda games. I think it's just like both of those games fall down in different areas, you know?
Yeah.
Phantom Hourglass has obviously the dungeon you go back to again and again. Spirit Tracks fixed that, like the dungeon is more interesting because you don't have to go back through it, you just go to different areas of it. However, the overworld traversal sucks in Spirit Tracks. It's just not fun.
It gets tired quite quickly, and by the end of the game it is quite flat out annoying. Like it's almost like puzzly in a way, where you're just
especially those fucking bomb trains that chase you. It's just like, leave me the fuck alone, man. I'm just trying to get to places.
And it's all touchscreen controlled as well. It's not like you're doing this with buttons or anything.
You see, I don't actually mind the touchscreen control stuff for those Zelda games. I actually think it works pretty well and is intuitive, and I like the puzzles where you take boomerangs around and draw their path and stuff like that. So yeah, I do like those games. I'd like them to get remade or re-released at some point and maybe refined, but yeah, they're very lesser talked about Zeldas, I think. Generally.
They're very unusual, and I think that art style probably hasn't aged the best, but they utilize the DS in a very awesome way rather than just porting games.
Maybe one of the best puzzles of all time in Phantom Hourglass, where you shut your DS, and open it.
Yeah.
Oh, so
some
good.
Really strong puzzles similar to that in Spirit Tracks as well. I was very impressed.
Very strong dungeons, actually. Like the dungeon in Spirit Tracks, really good. Very tricky and clever. Some of the best stuff in the series, honestly.
Really cool.
Shout out to that game. Number 4, Bally. Can you scrape your way past 1 point and get one more?
This is hard.
It's not going to be easy for you, so let's take a listen to song number 5. Didn't realize I'm going quite sinister, you know? A lot of slightly sinister music in the back half here. Of a theme, maybe. But, you know, we're getting there.
That is hard. Like that.
Uh-huh.
See, all these other
Have you
ones,
noticed
I'm like,
what my choice is so far?
see, the other ones, like, I was, oh, yeah, that's in my brain somewhere. I just can't quite put together where it is. It's like, I don't think I've heard this song before. Like,
I can guarantee you probably have.
yeah.
I think you have. Yeah, you must have.
Yeah, I mean, I must have done. Because it's got huge Luigi's Mansion vibes, but I don't think it's Luigi's Mansion. It's quite upbeat at points, and I think what emulates Luigi's Mansion sorts of things, maybe something like a Captain Toad or something. I want to even go.
Okay.
But then you could maybe argue that with like other Mario games as well. But then it sounds a lot like the Ashley's theme from WarioWare. And I'm like, what? How does that link? And is there some? Maybe it's just like a ghostly boss from almost any Nintendo game, almost like
like that. There is an
Kirby
extent to
game.
which, you know, scary, like almost spooky stuff can worm its way into even the cutest and
right.
cuddliest of video games.
But maybe
true.
it's like there's ghosts in. I want to say, like, I'm just looking at a list of games I've played, and I'm just thinking like Shantae maybe or something. 'Cause that's,
Okay.
like, quite ghostly, and it's a more modern game because it does sound quite, you know, high quality.
The quality is there, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not thinking like Stealth Inc. 2, but no, I don't. Yeah, no. I want to say it's something I played on like Wii U. I'm veering more towards Shantae, to be honest. And I think I've only played one Shantae, so I think I'll go Shantae Pirate's Curse, which I think is
that your final answer, Shantae and the Pirate's Curse?
Yes.
It's a good guess. Unfortunately, it is incorrect. This is from. I was trying to lead you a little bit. It is from a cute, cuddly platformer. This is from Kirby and the Rainbow Curse.
That was literally my other guess. God
oh my
damn.
goodness, Bally!
Yes.
Why did you not go with it?
Yes.
Oh, damn.
Okay.
This is Escape from Grab Hand, which, yes, was a Wii U game, Kirby and the Rainbow Curse. And I don't know when in the game this happens, but I heard it and I was like, okay, interesting. A Kirby song that sounds like this, not usually what you expect from a Kirby soundtrack. So, again, one.
Did I say Kirby when I ran through my thought process?
I
there?
think you did at one point
Yeah,
say
okay,
Kirby,
yeah,
yes.
yeah.
So,
Damn.
yeah.
Damn.
It's always a bummer when you're on the tip of your tongue and then you just go with the other direction.
Those are mighty hard games right there.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I didn't pick easy songs for them either, right? Like I could have picked some more obvious Kirby songs or stuff like that. But yeah, this is a game that I don't remember a lot of. I remember enjoying it, but it was super short, and I was bummed out that I spent most of the time looking at it on the gamepad and not in HD where it looked fucking gorgeous on the television. And that's the big problem with this game, right? It's like, it's a beautiful art style. Like, so much care and attention went into the kind of clay style, and yet most of it is played on the lower resolution gamepad where you can't enjoy it quite as much as how beautiful it looks on the screen.
I think it still looks really good on the gamepad, and I do think, like, as short as this game is, I rarely criticize games for being too short, honestly, and
totally.
And that's maybe partly to do with the podcast. We've talked about that before, but like, I was very happy with this game overall. You lent it to me, and I just played it in maybe a weekend.
Yeah,
it was super short, and some really cool bosses. I like. There's a very cool space themed boss, and there was sounds in that song that made me think, is that the space something final boss? And it's far too spooky for a final boss, and then I couldn't remember the previous spooky level or boss or whatever. So, but yeah, it's a really cool game. We love quirky Kirby. We've said that before, and right now I think that what was that game on Switch quite near launch that just seemed
Star Allies,
crazy vanilla Kirby. You know, it's just like Kirby needs to step it up more, I think. You know.
Yeah, and I don't know how often that'll happen. Crazy Kirby just tends to be, I don't know, let's do a free to play fucking Smash Brothers knockoff with Kirby. Like, that's kind of what he is at the moment, and that's fine, I guess, but like, I really would prefer them to do weird ideas. Like on the DS, they did Mass Attack, which, like, I don't think Mass Attack's a great game. I played it and didn't finish it because it's It's just not amazing. But that was weird, and I enjoyed the fact that it was something quite different. And yeah, I think regular Kirby games are just fucking boring. Generally, is the rule.
I've played Amazing Mirror and that on the Game Boy Advance, and that's a bit more Metroidvania, which is interesting for Kirby. But then I've also played Crystal Shards on N64, which was like the unique thing about that game is combining multiple powers. I don't think you can do that in other Kirby's necessarily, and that was fine for all of like, I don't know, a few levels. Hey, you got a double-bladed lightsaber. That's cool.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
That's a 2001 kind of game. But
oh hell yeah.
But yeah, other than that, I just look back at Canvas Curse and Rainbow Curse as great Kirby games, and the rest do feel very drab.
I think Kirby and the Rainbow Curse is one of those which like is so forgotten that no one even brings it up when we talk about Switch ports. Like, it's never even mentioned when we talk about Switch ports.
We've got Mario Maker, which came out with a pen that uses the touchscreen on the Switch, and you could totally do that for this game, but it's not even in the discussion. Yeah, it's mad.
Like, everyone's like, yeah, they've got everything on Switch now except for Xenoblade, and it's like, man,
and Star Fox.
Star Fox. And people weirdly, people bring up Star Fox Zero more than they bring up this game.
It made waves both good and bad when it came out. You know,
I think so. I think that's probably why it sticks in the memory versus Kirby that came out and was like, okay, people who liked it, but then no one fucking talked about it ever again, and it got forgotten about. So
I think another game that deserves to be in that discussion, although it would be a bit trickier, is Nintendo Land.
Yeah, I mean that's the hard one because that like entire game is built around the asymmetrical multiplayer, you know. So it'd be tricky to replicate it, but it's a fantastic game. It's very good. So there you go, Bally. 1 measly point on the board.
You got your revenge good there.
I did. I wasn't trying to be super mean, but I guess I just ended up that way.
I would have liked to have got maybe 2 or 3, but weirdly enough, I was strangely close through logic to getting that last one, even though I didn't recognize the song.
A couple of times you've been close, like in different ways, and you know, that's the fun of this game.
I was very gutted with my Freedom Planet flop. That was gutting.
For sure. That was like a side tangent, but you were on the lines. You were on like the right lines.
I felt further away from Spirit Tracks and fairly far away from Monkey Ball DS.
Yes, Monkey Ball DS is just mean. That's just me being an asshole.
But yeah,
oh dear.
Good pick.
Great. Well, there you go. That's Jukebox for you. Let us know how you did at home. Did you score better than Bally? It's tricky. It's a hard one. So let us know. And get on the social media. Shout us out. We are now done with the show. So it's time to talk about the end of the show. to get on out of here and say our goodbyes and plug our things. Bally, we've got to thank some people on Patreon for supporting us, and we have a new patron who has joined recently.
Shout out to our new patron Sam. Thank you very much for your support, and thank you to all of our $10 tier patrons. They are Zach S, Atari Alex, Thomas, Matthew, and my fiance Caroline. Thank you very much all for your support, and thank you to all of our other patrons. It's hugely appreciated, the support that you give this show.
Absolutely. It's good stuff, and we appreciate it, and we have bonus episodes that go up every month, and we'll have another one next month, of course. So check it out and subscribe if you want a bit more podcast and goodness from ourselves. You can obviously find the show in various places. We are on Spotify, on Stitcher, on iTunes. You can go review us on all those platforms. Give us as many stars as you think we are worth, and write some reviews. And we'd really appreciate seeing some of those pop up, so that we can reach some more people, reach some more ear holes, all those good things. And you can obviously find us on the internet in various places, such as Twitter. Twitter is a good place to go to track us down, see what we're talking about. You can find the podcast Twitter at TNL Podcast, where we tweet out when the show goes live, and Patreon episodes and updates and other stuff like that. You can obviously find me on Twitter at LordNBZ. Where can they find you, Bally?
I'm on Twitter at Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN 91. And I tweeted one of those fun things where it's like, every like I'll say a thing.
Yeah, have you finished that yet? Because you did get a bunch of likes, and I don't know. Yeah,
I've got to catch up. It's actually a lot of work.
Oh yeah,
it's good fun. And I think what was the most recent one I did? It was like my guilty pleasure, where I sort of got Tarzan out on the GameCube because that was a fun game. And I don't know, it's go like that. Get me to 30 likes, and I'll answer all those things.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. Quick reminder, we will be talking about Paper Mario, our next Backlog Club, in 2 shows' time. So you've got about a month to play through Paper Mario. Enjoying that as I go through it. And yeah, we'll have a big old chat about it when we get there. But I think that is going to close things out for us. Bally, any final thoughts before we leave here?
I'm just very excited to play some co-op It Takes Two, which seems to be taking 2021 by storm so far.
I know, my goodness.
To get on that.
That game has scored very well in a way that I didn't expect, but hoped, and certainly my hopes are being fulfilled. So I hope we enjoy that. I hope it's a good time, and I'm sure we'll discuss that next time. So that'll be us, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks' time for some more podcasting, some more video games, some more Nintendo. See you soon. Bye-bye, folks.
The musical interludes used on today's show were Luxurious Overture and Holy Wisdom, both from Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, copyright 505 Games 2019.